All right, cyber traders, welcome on back for another fantastic edition of our Traders Talk workshop, simulcasted actually for today on YouTube and Facebook Live. Great to see everybody live across all boards. Great to see Joannis, Jim, Mike, Patrick, Mark, Mike C, Gary V, all of us live inside Cyber Group. And hey, if you're joining us again on social media, Facebook Live or YouTube, welcome on back as well. We have a lot to talk about, folks. Once again, my name is Josh Levitan. For anyone unfamiliar with myself on social media, at least, I'm Fausto's senior instructor. I tagged in for him this morning when he typically hosts the morning meeting. So hey, for Lewis V on YouTube and for all of us otherwise, if you have any questions that you would like to ask me, whether it be during this live presentation or afterwards, if it's on the recording side as well, feel more than free to send over a quick email. I always like to post my email address right there on YouTube, josh@ctutrading.com. We just had Mark pick up 41 cents just now on a short on Palantir, PLTR. Nice catch from Mark just now. He got in from the price $10.92. Mark, excellent trade, man. What was the time of your entry, if you don't mind me asking? Hey, markets are dropping off right now. There's a lot that's moving. I'm actually in a trade myself right now, albeit not PLTR. So I wanted to ask Mark around what time he ended up shorting this, because it seems like it ended up breaking under a big support level here early on at $11, but perhaps a false break at first. And just like we teach, it's to say, what happens if history repeats itself? And I just came off a coaching session one-on-one trading with one of our students, Scott, and that's exactly what happened to us. Ended up taking a loss just before, ended up jumping in on another trade, and it ended up working out pretty nicely, and that's the stock I'm actually still in on. So Mark got in at 10:43 and 24 seconds. Let's see. He says, oops, sorry about that. He says 10:02:46. All right, so it was off the first break here, essentially, right? It, held it as support at first. It popped up. And when it comes down, it's definitely a good time to think about taking that short. But what happens if the stock isn't ready to make that move just yet, right? So Mark just picked up 41 cents. That's a hell of a profit on 1,000 shares. That's $410 that he just made, right? I asked Mark what time he got in, because it does go to show that there was a little amount of turbulence first before he ended up getting the exact move that he wanted, right? So I'm happy Mark made the money, right? But in this case, when it begins to peak back up here, I'd be a little nervous about continuation on this run up. So with that, it's for me to say I'd rather personally, and I'm just speaking for myself here perhaps, but I'd rather set that stop such that if it breaks back over 11, I have no problem taking like a dinky -2, -3. It frees up your ability to try and, take another trade. In the time that it took here for this to consolidate and then re-break 11, perhaps there's something else that you could be watching and entering right from then and there, right? But of course, it just goes to show for Mark's trade, when history repeated itself, when this re-broke big support at 11, the more selling that we had, well, that's where he got his move. So either way, fantastic profit, at least from Mark, who just closed out Palantir. I'm in on Neo. That's my trade I'm in on right now. Not as if Neo is the best stock to look at right now, folks. It really is not. It's just a sideless stock, much like PLTR is, much like an AMC is right now. Actually, really quick, one thing I forgot to do here before I officially started. Give me a quick moment. I need to do a little substitution here on the chart. That looks more like my chart. All right. So I just came off a coaching session with one of our students. I wanted to briefly go over what we were both watching. So, we were kind of fixed on Neo for a little bit. It's a stock personally that I took a lot of time in pre-market to mark out its levels. So I would rather focus on something I'm more familiar with. I'd rather focus on something that I took the effort and time to plan out ahead, right? So, hey, I did the same on AMC. I did the same on the fund trade from earlier today. Unfortunately, the fund trade was more of a bust shortly after the open. So that wasn't too good after 9:30. But hey, I'm just focused on the stocks that I took the time and effort in pre-market to really map out. So I'm talking to Scott in our session. I'm saying, all right, well, I was watching Neo earlier as a short. We had a ton of big selling right at this exact price, 22.38. Actually, I was short on Neo from earlier in the morning. did all right on it, but it didn't make the big drop I was expecting, and I ended up letting go of some profit before it ultimately squeezed back up a bit. So, a little volatile, but it's to say, what happens if history repeats itself? What happens after the market opens at some point, whether it be, right away or shortly after? What happens if history repeats itself? So, what I want to do briefly here, folks, is at least show you bookmap. I want to show you what the heat map looked like here, level 4 as we nickname it, and we'll kind of go from there. So for all of us here right now, you could just see that I have a few different columns with the heat map. There's CVP, and then there's CVP delta. So it's to say that this column here will give me a pretty good idea as far as how much more buying than selling that we may have at a certain price. Or vice versa. It will show me how much more selling that we have compared to the buying at a specific price. Let me ask you a quick question, folks. From Mark, Grant, Patrick, Kathleen, Jim, etc., all of us inside Cyber Group here at least, looking at this column on the far right, CVP Delta, generally speaking, what price level has the biggest spike to it, the biggest bar altogether, green or red? What price level, looking at the column on the far right here, has the biggest spike of volume? And in the meantime, I'm gonna just catch a quick question from Elizabeth on YouTube, asking about DWAC. So I'm gonna attend to that question, Elizabeth, as soon as we finish up this here on Neo. But Jim, Bill, Brian, Bob, the B's there in tandem, Mark, Cliff, Patrick, all saying at 22:38, right? So I was watching this with Scott, and at the time, it was actually re-breaking underneath 2250 and the opening print here, even at 2255. So at the time, I was telling Scott, I'm like, all right, well, hey, if this can kind of bounce back up here, maybe we could short it right from the opening bell print for any one of us inside Cyber Group. I'll bring Bookmap back up, and I'll just say that the opening bell print is typically the big dot that we have on Bookmap here right at the open. That was a 775,000 share transaction. I don't care what the price is for the stock, folks. That's a lot of shares in one transaction. So that's like asking what happens if there's a 775,000 share iceberg order, right? I mean, hey, there's 115,000 shares on the bid when the market opened up at 22. Well, what's bigger, 115K or 775,000? It just goes to say, if this is big, if 22 is big, which it is, then we have to think that this is enormous right here. So this was already dropping off, and I was telling Scott, hey, if this could move back up towards 2255, then I feel good to see this act as resistance, and we would short it from there. However, it didn't do that. It ended up kind of just consolidating under 50, and I said to Scott, well, the more times history repeats itself here, the more times that we continue to see selling where we had selling in pre-market at that 2238, I'm certainly led to believe that this is going to make a pretty damn big drop, pretty damn big move at least. So right now we're watching the SPY, the S&P, but that's simply what I was looking at on Neo. Hey, Mark had his trade on Palantir. AMC dropped off a little bit prior to us beginning Traders Talk. And this was actually a small loss that I took with Scott prior to us jumping in on the Neo. So actually, as we were watching Neo, I turned over to AMC. And simply put, you could just see this more top purple line. This was a really strong level from the chart at $17.70 on AMC, just a stock also in the pre-market that I took a lot of time to prep and try and find its levels. You could see back from Friday, it was holding above 1770 pretty nicely here. You could see back from even a few days before that on Valentine's Day on the 14th. Look how well 1770 was holding as support. So I'm thinking, hey, what happens if support continues to break? I'm talking today, like here. Well, before I jumped in on Neo, to be completely transparent, I jumped in on AMC short right at 617.69. right here where my cursor is. Unfortunately, it popped right back up. I ended up taking an 8-cent loss on that because it was simply right place, wrong time. And I know there is, a shoulda, coulda, woulda, view here, perhaps if you're not a student, saying, "Oh, you could have held on to that trade." It seems like true, but I'm following like three or four other stocks at the same time, including Neo, which was one of the ones I was even more interested in following. So, I could have re-entered this trade here at this point when it re-broke that 1770, and that would have made for a pretty easy trade after. Would have made my money back and then some. But I'm in on Neo. So right now it's to say I'm making my money back anyway. And, Neo is actually making a better drop right now at this point, down to 22. All right. So, hey, I just wanted to kind of briefly show what I was following coming off my coaching session with one of our students just earlier. But otherwise, though, let's hop over to the DWAC stock because I want to answer some email questions and some questions that came in on social media or on YouTube at least. Sorry, from Elizabeth here. So first, regarding the DWAC, right? More or less, Elizabeth was asking. It's her first time here, right? So first off, welcome aboard to Elizabeth. Any one of our members on YouTube today or Facebook, or if you're a member inside the trading room, as a trial member testing our room out for a full week, welcome on aboard. So Elizabeth was asking, are people holding DWAC for a while? Do you have any thoughts on where it might close today? So let's run it back on DWAC. What I mean by that is let's do the same type of preparation, the same type of work that we could do in pre market to plot out our levels. Where's the smart money? Where's the big money? That's what we have to answer first, right? So, hey, I put DWAC on the pre market and morning watch lists, rightfully so. Of course, with the news out, we have to keep an eye on it. So, let me ask you really quick, folks. Start here. In the pre-market, if you're looking at DWAC here from the pre-market, where do we have big support? Where do we have support as a whole, I should ask? Where do we see dark orange or red lines that go horizontal across this screen? Mark S says 95 bucks. That's a good answer. And Dylan says 90, right? 95 and at 90 bucks. Two pretty big orders that were out there on the bid acting as support. All right. So what happens? Well, going into the market open in pre-market, this slammed under 95 bucks. We had a lot of selling at 95 bucks. What happens if history repeats itself? Well, if history repeats itself, I'm thinking that this stock is likely to continue to drop even lower, down to 90 perhaps, if not even lower than that. Doesn't seem like there is a big support under 90 at least, from pre-market. But when the market opens up, well, this sure repeated itself. This broke under $95 within the first minute. From there, well, what happened? It used 95 as resistance essentially, 94 even, but 95 would be the bigger volume-based level. It's just to say throughout this whole day, history has been repeating itself. Most recently here, for all the times it was needling at 90 bucks and breaking under 90, we're seeing a lot of selling. So once it finally slammed under 90 right at this point here, Elizabeth, it held it as resistance, dropping back down. So, hey, there was news that came out on it from over the weekend. We knew that we knew that we would be following this stock into the open today. Does not unfortunately guarantee a move up. Can't always buy a stock because news coming out, folks. We have to find our levels first and then just react to the stock within the first 3 to 5 minutes of the open, seeing what happens. Well, within the first 3 to 5 minutes, this stock broke under support, and that was pretty much it. That was a show. Maybe later in the day, if this could perhaps make a bounce off of 85, or even if it holds here, the more times it can kind of slip under but back over 87, maybe there's a chance. But it's just to say, follow the direction of this stock, follow the direction of DWAC altogether. It's what I did on Neo and AMC here today. That's just a really sloppy line here, if anything. Well, I could draw this a lot better even. So this was the one that was holding pretty nicely throughout pre-market. Looks like generally it's holding under this trend line for a little bit right now, a little break above it here. And this is when we thought there was a pretty good chance that it could move up, a little bump and run off the trend line type pattern, but didn't happen. It fell back under the line. Right now is actually the first time it's breaking this type of trend line here since 10 o'clock or shortly afterwards. It's not the best time to be trying to anticipate a bounce. So even with this breaking the trend line here, let's see what happens at 87 bucks first before anything. Folks, really quick, because I don't like to be in trades when I'm in Traders Talk. The whole point of Traders Talk is simply to, answer questions that students and members have already submitted to me and to break down the X's and O's as to why a stock is moving, from the morning. I just closed my Neo short. I just got out to get the hell out. There's no scientific reason for me to get out. It's just to take the money and run. I just want to wanted to let you folks know. It was holding this trend line still really well. If it keeps dropping, couldn't care any less. All right. But the last thing I want to have happen is for this to pop up as I'm going through questions like this, and then for me to blow like 25, 30 cents worth of potential profit. So we talked about this in journaling class, folks, back last week in the phase one course. You don't need to have a calculated mathematics, scientific reason to take money and run. All right, so I'll jump back to Neo later on today. Elizabeth says, thank you. I am new, but have a feeling this is what I'll be doing every day for the next 10 years. Well, Elizabeth, welcome on aboard. If you're interested in joining our live trading room, just at the end of this workshop at least, just go right down to the link on the banner below. Whoops, not that one. There we go, that one there at the end. But you could join us every week, in our live trading room to continue this type of audio commentary. Let's keep the chat going, though. We have from YouTube first. I'll jump back to the live chat board and emails otherwise from Ashen here asking, good morning. DTSS, if history repeat itself, can we wait? Uh, that nice spike that happens twice a year in DTSS? Let's see. Neo's still dropping off. But DTSS, well, hey, this was definitely one from the market open that we had called out. It wasn't on our, special watch list at first, but when the market opened, this popped up, of course. It was moving up on the gainers list. Ashen's talking about a spike that happens basically 2 times a year on the DTSS. And generally, I could see what Ashen means. It's like a very pop and drop type of stock, a very I don't know what the float is. My assumption is this is a low float stock, but just to say it's a pop and drop type of stock that after news comes out and after it makes an initial run, that's the end of it. So for right now, the volume just looks really bad on this year, Ashen. It moved up nicely earlier, but right now, though, it's not too appealing. If anything, there's actually like a 45,000 share iceberg order that you could even see here on my level 3. On the TradeStation Matrix, you could see that there on the far right, about a 45,000 share order. So until it breaks that, I wouldn't expect DTSS to move up any higher. All right. We talked briefly about the DWAC trade, right? And it's just to say this, folks, like fun moves with DWAC. So once we saw DWAC break down today, we had a pretty good inkling what would happen on this PHUN, right? All right. So with that, let me jump to my email inbox right now. I have a bunch of different emails that I need to answer just for this workshop. So I had a question from Rod here first. He was just talking about Macy's, I think it was. He was asking just if I can cover Macy's, the setup on it today for Traders Talk. And essentially what Rod wrote me was that he had marked 26.80, $26.80 as a level. He said from a small 12,000 share volume dot on Bookmap. So like one of those big dots I referenced before. Rod said that he had about 12,000 shares worth. That was at 8:30 in the morning, basically. So that was at 26.80. So Rod's telling me that he used 26.80 as a pre-built level. He said that there was no opening print at 9:30, but at 9:34 in the morning, there was a 61K print, and it was filled Exactly at 2680. All right, so right away before I even finish Rod's email, I just want to mention 12,000. Well, Rod phrased it well. It's small, right? He phrased it that way to me, small. And it definitely is. Like 12K is not really, doing it for me, as far as like, making a really big level out of that. But when there's a 61K print on top of that shortly after the open, and it's at the exact same price, hey, I'll take it. So 2680 definitely is a pretty big level after 9:34 in the morning. But he said he was too slow to climb on. Essentially, it ended up going up to a high of 2810. Rod ultimately asking, should I have been able to get this? Should I have been? So the answer to that question basically begins with, how many other stocks are you watching from pre-market, Rod? Were you following 5 or 6 different stocks, or were you following just two? Because hey, less is more, right? If I'm following less stocks, then I have a better ability to try and jump in on one of those couple. If I'm following 8 or 6 different stocks at the same time, definitely makes it a lot harder. I'm kind of like flopping around a lot, and I don't like doing that. So that's the first question I would kind of have to ask there. But let's bring up Bookmap otherwise, though, and what we'll do is basically just go through this as a whole. So, generally, I would be following the 50-cent price levels, the whole number price levels, again, like 2650, 27, 2750, 28. Those are more likely where we're going to find the icebergs, right? So I would have those levels marked out anyway. I will say prior to the market opening, there is a pretty damn big order at exactly 2697. All right. It's a funky price there. It's not exactly 27, but I would say 2697 is now a big backup level to the whole number. Well, by the time the market was opening up, actually, this is like 15 minutes prior to the open here, Rod. So this is pretty telling. This is not the opening bell print, folks, but this big iceberg order just got filled. It broke through this order. When an order on the bid gets broken through, folks, what color pops up on the tape? On time and sales window, what color pops up when a big order on the bid gets filled? We just saw it earlier on Neo. Red, right? Red, red, red. And absolutely, we would consider that to be selling. So I'll tell you what, on Macy's, of course, 27 is a key level, but 2697 is just as big. Just as big. And if you don't think that can make the world's difference with taking a trade, think again. Looks like after the market opened up, well, hey, this stock ended up making a nice little breakout. It broke above Rod's 2680. It broke above it. Let's see here. I just want to see that transaction from Rod. On Bookmap here, Rod, I think this may be what you're referring to. I see a 2680, but it's only for about 29 or 30,000 shares. This is at 9:35 in the morning. When the market did open up, it took a few minutes, a couple minutes, Rod. 2640 here. This is absolutely the opening bell print here for Macy's. Much, much, much more often than not, opening bell print is at 9:30, maybe a few seconds after. It is not often where it's at 9:32 or after, but I've seen it happen. This is actually the opening print here this morning, Rod, at 2640. It's about a 370,000 share transaction. So let's draw a line there. Now, it is just to say, though, right? Within the first 3 to 5 minutes, we're not trading. We're normally not trading the first 3 to 5, right? But it's just to say this, though. If we had so much selling at 2697, the question that you ask is, what happens if history repeats itself? You'll see what I mean in a bit, folks. But it seems like at first, Macy's was working this nice trend up, and Rod was looking for the breakout. So, it broke above his line, and he was a little slow to the draw in getting in on it. All right. Well, it actually did break above 27. It made a nice pop from it, believe it or not. So, you know what? Let me ask you a quick question, folks. For all of us live inside Cyber Group, especially those that were with me in particular in the phase one class last week, when a stock breaks above a resistance and it pops off it, like it moves off that level, it breaks above resistance and it runs off it. What are we expecting that resistance to initially then become? To initially then become. Resistance turns into what? Exactly, support. So, hey, we talked about that in phase one, just a basic broad concept, just with charting. Resistance, once it gets broken through, once a stock breaks resistance and it runs from it, I'm thinking the first time that it pulls back to that same level, the first time would be the best time to see support. I know that's easy to say because look what happened. Hey, it ended up breaking under 27 and under 26.97, but it broke right back above it, right? It went under and over. My best entries to buy a stock, Rod, are directly after it breaks through a big level on the way up, right? And you folks in class that were with me in phase one last week know that. That's basically my presidential, campaign slogan here. If I ever run for president, that's basically going to be my slogan, right? You hear it from me every day. So hey, once it popped here and made a quick move up, the first time that it pulls back to that same level, I would expect for that to be support. From there, it ran up pretty nicely, right? Now though, hey, that iceberg that got filled at 26.97 technically was on the bid, and like all of us correctly wrote earlier, technically that is selling. That's red on the tape. What happens if history repeats itself? What happens if history repeats itself? And the more times this ended up needling 26.97 in particular, not even 27, but the more times this was needling 26.97, look what was holding as support, not 27. I know that might seem very petty, but this literally makes a world's difference on a trade. 27 wasn't holding, it was 26.97, and once this rebroke under 26.97, right? So essentially, Macy's had a nice move this morning off the earnings, but the more times we kept seeing 26.97 getting poked at, once the bear gets poked at enough, you see a big drop. All right. So really quick, folks, let me just keep going through my email inbox here. Sometimes a few emails get stuck in like spam. Which one did from one of our students, Bruno, which I don't know if Bruno's tuning in live right now, but Bruno, I will write you back as soon as we finish up live traders talk here. All right, so had a question from Jim W, one of our students otherwise, and he was just basically going over, I think, a setup that he had on SoFi this morning. So he said, hey, Josh, as we discussed a couple weeks back, I'm just sticking with a few good setups and not completely following the trade room discussion at the opening. And I think that's a great idea for anyone that feels like they're just very flustered, or not even to use the word flustered, but if things are just difficult to follow in the morning, folks, hey, Fausto's making his call outs in the morning. I'm making call outs myself. You're going to see a slew of different students that are making call outs. You don't know if they're good traders or not, right? Let's just be very truthful. Everyone here, the longer that you're in this chat room, you can get a pretty good grip on who's who. But as a brand new student, you don't really know. And with all of these posts being made in the trading room, it could be hard to follow everything. So, I told Jim this a couple weeks back in a coaching session. We're just saying, hey, for a week or so, for a little bit, just focus on the stocks that are more likely to make a decent move, and stocks that are within your skill level, your comfort level. So, I know Jim's not the type of student to be trading like a level 5 crazy ass spread stock. No, I mean, he's trading the SoFis out there, the AMCs out there. So I told Jim, hey, if you are sticking with those stocks, then it might just be good to like minimize the trading room for a bit. Just focus on those stocks, focus on your levels for those trades. So Jim did that on SoFi. And he said that on SoFi, he had levels at 1050, $11, which makes sense as 50-cent levels and whole numbers. I am always putting levels at these prices. At 50-cent levels and whole numbers, it's an automatic every time. So, I would have drawn lines there anyway. Jim also had a line set at 1075, and he said he had that from this morning from pre-market. Certainly seems like 1075 was a strong level there, Jim. Really, after the market opened up, for sure. He had SoFi, he was following the OCGN trade, and then he had Ford. I think those were his main three, really. So Jim was, stating to me here that at around 9:50 in the morning, SoFi broke under and back over the 1075 level, which it did. He had entered at 1076. Well, he ended up getting out at 1096 after a reverse Fausto flag around like 10 o'clock in the morning. Let's see. Oh, so I don't know what time Jim got out exactly, whether it was pretty much here. I think here, but otherwise here, otherwise. He got out at $10.96. So he took a nice profit. He says, interestingly enough, I missed the fall back down to about 1075. And the next, oh, okay, yeah, so that means he got out here. He got out here then. Jim got out here. He missed the drop back and then the move back up, he said. That's all right, though, right? Because at the end of the day, the first time's the best time. What I mean by that is, if Jim had a clear line set from his pre-market preparation at 1075, and he's drawing that there because it's a very strong level, then the first time that it comes down to that level, I'm thinking is the best time to see that level act as potential support. Jim, I don't think I have SoFi on my book map here, so I'm going to load that up right now. We'll see what the heat map looked like at first. 1075. So I want to see why he had that as a level. Doesn't seem like SoFi was anywhere near 1075 from the last 5 days, 10 days even. So it wasn't like a strong historical level from the chart. Maybe this would be it. Maybe back from January 28th, perhaps. Or maybe otherwise from Bookmap. Maybe Bookmap had a really strong iceberg level there at 1075 from pre-market. Just goes to show though that, I mean, hey, yeah, he had his eyes set on a pretty strong level. All right, so this is pre-market for SoFi. I don't see 75 as prominent, but I do see 70 as a more prominent level at first. Um, Maybe from the very dip point here in pre-market, when pre-market opened up, that could potentially be why Jim had that as a level. But it looks like when the market opened up, it looks like 1075 built itself up to be a bit bigger level, 1080, 1075. So simply put, once it kind of crashed under 75 and back over, hey, Jim took a pretty clean entry. If he was watching this as an iceberg level 2, that adds on top of 1075 being a strong level for him. The first time's the best time. Don't try and grab it the second time. I mean, is it possible it could hold the second time and move up still? Yes, I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I'm telling you that you're going to have a much easier ability to enter a trade and anticipate a move the first time. And the more times that this support level is getting needled at, much like everything else that's dropping in the market, if history keeps repeating itself, eventually this support level is going to break, right? All right, how about this? Let's jump to OCGN here really briefly. I want to jump to OCGN. I had a couple of chats regarding that as far as what I was watching into the open for this trade. So this one was, not difficult, but it's just to ask, what's the trend of this stock, folks? For Patrick, Mark, Bob, Kevin, Kathleen, all of us otherwise, what's the trend of this stock going into the market open? From 8:30 to 9:30, what's the trend of this guy here, OCGN? Down, right? When a stock is dropping, when a stock is moving down, we're seeing more selling. The question is, what happens if history repeats itself? So this morning, I was not necessarily expecting OCGN to just pop and run instantaneously. For a stock that's dropping like this leading into the open, at a minimum, I'm expecting consolidation. And then otherwise, if it fails to make a clean breakout upward, and if the stock re-breaks under a big support, I'm only expecting it to continue to drop. So unfortunately, I ended up missing out on this run here this morning. It didn't pop right away. It ended up dropping off at first, or continued to pull back and consolidate, but it ended up effectively moving off of 380 and then here 390 just about. And 390 I had as a really strong chart level, not only from pre-market here, but ultimately from the daily chart. I believe 390 I had as a pretty strong chart level. Generally, I was thinking myself like 390-ish, 389-ish. You can kind of just see support, 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 breaks under support, resistance at first off a false breakout. You have some chop here, but otherwise held back under 390. So, hey, you know what? I'm respecting 390 as a pretty strong level from the chart. This didn't have much to do with iceberg levels here, at 390. So, hey, if 390 around that area is holding this cleanly as a level from the daily chart, then I'm expecting at some point or another for this to be a pretty clean looking level after the open. Easy to say, but when it broke above 390 and it ran off that price, it broke 390 as resistance, it ran off it. I'm not going to ask the same question because Bob, Mark, Dylan, BJ, Jim, Grant, Patrick all wrote it inside the trading room earlier, so you know the answer already. When a stock breaks above big resistance, the first time, or I'm sorry, when a stock breaks above big resistance and runs off it, the first time it pulls back is the best time to see it anticipate a support. So, needless to be said, that's what happened here. Right now, this is trying to move back up. This is actually back to a pretty strong level from pre-market that I set on OCGN. We had a decent iceberg level early in the morning at $4.20. So, hey, likewise with what we've been seeing with the drop-offs like on Neo and AMC and Macy's, the more this needles $4.20 moving upward, I'm thinking eventually we're going to see this stock make a nice new run. Now, does that mean it's going to happen right now? No. Does that mean it's going to happen at all? No. But hey, we're following the trend. It broke above this, had a nice run at first. So it crashed back under it here. It's holding it as resistance. So right now, this isn't really the best time to be trading. We know that. So this is where we need to be a little patient. Let this thing prove itself to us as far as a potential afternoon move. Right now, it's not really doing a whole lot. So I'm not expecting a whole lot. But if this later today, let's say in, I don't know, like 3.5 hours or in 3 hours, by the time it's 2:30 in the afternoon when I do the afternoon meeting again on social media, hey, if this is coming back up to $4.20 and it's retesting that resistance again, the more times it needles it, I'm expecting a big pop and run. So, hey, we'll check back in on this trade later on today. We'll see what happens. So 420. All right. Folks, let me know if you have any other questions, at least regarding the OCGN trade from today. The Macy's trade, of course, we talked about. DWAC and Fun, I would only expect those to continue to pull back a bit, although it seems like fun did, or although it seems like DWAC did break the trend line pretty nicely. Fund's trying to go with it a slight amount, but that's really it. Not a whole lot really happening there on the fund trade. But it does go to show that DWAC did break that resistance level pretty nicely, or the trend line acting as resistance. Later today, it wouldn't shock me if this ends up making another run. But going back to bookmap on this for one of our members on social media, Elizabeth, today, again, it's just a matter of seeing continuation. So what that means is, hey, this actually broke above a nice order on the ask. A pretty big iceberg on the ask, contrary to what we would consider selling. This is actually buying. When we see this order getting filled, that means we're seeing a lot of green on the tape at $90. The more green that we continue to see at 90, the more this could pop over 90. Then I am expecting to have a nice run. So that's what we have to kind of watch out for here, at least on the DWAC trade. All right. All right, how about this right now? Because to be very transparent, we didn't really have too many great movers from the morning. We did have the INDO up, and actually, this is starting to make another move back up. So, actually, perfect timing. This actually helps me out quite a bit because I didn't have any other questions from email come in for today's Traders Talk. So, what we'll do is actually cover this INDO move from earlier today. I didn't trade this myself. I wish I could say I did, but simply I was following other stocks. But right now, obviously, this is making another push back up. So let's at least follow this from the morning and explain why this made the exact move that it made. So for Kevin, Kathleen, Dylan, BJ, Bob, Mark, etc., this is the INDO from the pre-market hours. We did have this on our morning watch list, right? Just because I didn't jump in doesn't mean that no one else did. This was on the top of the morning watch list. So for anyone that was much more set on following INDO today, then you could do the same exact type of prep work that I normally do and that we'll kind of do here now. But let me ask, with that in mind, where do we have a potential resistance? Where do we have an orange line that's going across this page? BJ and Mark and Bob all saying right around 540-ish, right? You can say 540, 544 here, the top green line. Yeah, just right there, right? Right there. So I would absolutely mark that as a level because it was there since 9 o'clock. It was there for 25 minutes. I feel like that order is out there for a reason. What's the reason? I don't have that reason for you. I just know that based on how long this order was out there for, there's got to be some reason for it. It's not just for no reason. So, hey, I'll mark out 540 and 544 as a potential key level here prior for the market open. It was 540 and exactly 544, we said, right? 540 and 544. Seems like after the market opened up, well, obviously this took off. It ended up making a nice run up to the point where it even got halted. But it's just to say, I know this is easy to say. I know this part's easy for me to say. But when it re-breaks above resistance, once history repeated itself, there's a false break here. But when history continued to repeat itself, this ended up making the run up much higher, right? Now, when a stock gets halted and it reopens up off of a halt, we're going to see what's called the opening halt print, or, that's what I call it at least. Now, much like the market open, that's going to be a big dot on Bookmap, and that is going to be a key level. At this price, at $5.71, when this reopened up off the first of its halts, there is a 58,000 share transaction, folks. 58,000 shares. That's huge for a stock like this because when you look at the rest of the order book, at $6 up, dark orange line. We know dark orange is a big level. Well, there's only 4,500 shares there. What's bigger, 4,500 or 57,58,000? I think we know that answer, right? So that's just where I'm emphasizing, hey, 571, albeit 540 here is pretty strong. Certainly, if this could break back over 571 strongly, then this should easily make another pop and run. So even though it broke this and moved up nicely, once it broke 571, you could see how clean of a resistance that was. From there, obviously ended up moving up much higher, right? What I'll do is basically just plot all of the opening halt prints here, just so you have. So this got halted like 4 times over, I think, right? So 620 was another price where this ended up reopening up from a halt. There was a big print that came in there. There was another one that came in at 750 for about 60,000 shares that came in. The more times the stock gets halted going up, you know it's going to get, if not halted down, then you know it's typically just going to tank and that's the end of it. So, you don't want to press your luck. It's just to say at least. Hmm. Generally speaking, it didn't kiss it perfectly, but generally speaking, looks like 620 ended up holding nicely as a bit of a bottom. It broke under and over 650, kind of in between this range, and then continued to move up. It broke above 750 and took off again. So, how about this? I mean, I haven't really followed INDO that much. I turned over to the trade as we did Traders Talk here and said, oh, it's moving back up. But from there, I ended up plotting these lines, right? I didn't have any lines on this chart prior to this meeting starting. So, although this was on the morning watch list, simply put, I don't have like chameleon eyes or lizard eyes. I can't watch 20 different things at once. You know what I mean? And I'm being silly when I say that, but hey, this morning I was following AMC and Neo and Fun and DWAC. I wasn't as focused on INDO. Pretty interesting though that these halt prints are creating support. 620 effectively, this held above. 750 effectively, this held above. Yes, you could say also these peaks, these highs here, perhaps you could use as some, complementary level, but I'm more focused on where the big money is. So if I happen to see like a 60,000 share print come in on the tape at 750, well, you better believe I'm going to be following 750 as a key level. So it's just easy to say, but generally this dropped, it held above 750 and it's trying to make another move here. I would assume my next resistance on this trade would just simply be off of 9. Again, the whole number price levels are always going to be big points of interest too. So now that I have a few of these lines up, I may as well keep going. So I have 9, I have 8, 7 here, of course. It looks like generally speaking, this held above 7 here pretty nicely. Maybe later today, this pulls back down to 8 and holds a higher low off of 8 and then pops up higher. That's just a shoot from the hip kind of thought. Can I show book map for the INDO, asks BJ. I definitely can. I will. It's not going to give you a pretty image, though. Just want to let you know. Maybe now it's a better image, but 9's your resistance. From earlier, it's tough to show a stock on bookmap with the halts because this is like really tough to read, right? Aside from the dots, this doesn't really help you out too much. So right now, it's at least a better visual with 9 acting as the major resistance. From Ashen asking, or not asking, but stating KAVL volume is coming in right now. Let's take a look. Yeah, KAVL looks pretty sharp here for the late morning, early afternoon session. Doesn't mean it's going to continue, but obviously it's a nice trend. So, on this trade, at least what we could do is bring bookmap up for this one, and we can try and at least anticipate where this may go to next. All right. So let's see. Let's see if I could ask this question here. One second, folks. Just trying to get Bookmap kind of oriented in a specific way. All right, cool. So for Ashen on YouTube and for all of us inside the live trading room, where do we have resistance here? Looking at this chart, looking at my screen on KAVL from the morning, where did we have resistance? Market is dropping off. Left some money on the table for Neo, but as I said earlier, I do not care. I'm going to jump onto a coaching session with one of our students, Wilson, coming up at noontime here, and we'll try and follow AMC, Neo, and all of these that are effectively moving down with the market right now. But where was resistance earlier on KVL? Well, Mark and Bob both say 275. I'd say that's a pretty good answer. Dark red line here. 49 or 44,000 shares, just about there, right? All right. So the reason I had that is because, well, there were a couple of smaller orders around that 275, but you could see what's been holding pretty nicely for the most part as resistance. This broke above 275 right around 10:30, 10:45 Eastern time. Well, much like one of our members, Skip P inside the live trading room wrote, "Hey, 10:30, we're getting close to that reversal time. For as much as this stock made a move here today, we can't keep expecting for it to make a move up." So what I mean by that is, if it's testing this as resistance for the first time it tests that level, I'd expect for it to hold. Whether it be a false breakout or just a clean hold of resistance, the first time is the best time, right? So looks like it made a false breakout from there, but now, or for a little while, it was popping above 275 here. It hasn't continued to move up just yet. So really good call from Ashen inside YouTube, right, or on YouTube right now. But if 275 is that big of a level, then we got to see this really begin to pop higher right now. Very broad and generic line that I always say, in class, traders talk, coaching, just when I sleep, just to say, when a stock breaks through a big volume level, we should be getting a pretty big move shortly after. And if it's not going to make that big move that we want shortly after, well, it's going to make a big move. Like, trust me, I guarantee you it's going to make a big move. Just not the move that you're looking for. What I mean by that is, simply put, but when this broke above 275 here, if you're jumping in above 275 and it's, running, or if it breaks above 275 and you jump in, all right, well, you bought it directly after it broke through that level on the way up. But if this is such a big level, we should be getting a pretty big move shortly after. If it's not making that big move that you personally want it to make, let's drop the ego. Don't hold on, because it's going to make a big move. Just not the move that you're looking for. All right, folks, I have to jump out right now. I have to finish up Traders Talk here because I have to go on to a coaching call at 12. But if you have any other questions, feel more than free to send over a quick private chat. That goes for BJ or Mark or Kathleen, Brian, Kevin, Henry, Jim, Bob, you name it. All of us live inside the trading room. You folks know best. For all of us on YouTube, Facebook Live, hey, I appreciate you sticking with me today. We normally do this maybe 2 or 3 times on YouTube across the entire calendar year. So we're not going to be doing this next week, the week after that, and so forth. Probably not for a little while. So if you're on YouTube right now, and if you're new to our streams here, first and foremost, I appreciate you sticking with me. Here's my email address one more time. I always like to post it here at the bottom of our stream. Josh@ctutrading.com is my email. So like all of our students, like Kathleen and BJ and Dylan and Bob and whomever inside the trading room, any questions that you have on YouTube, feel more than free to send over my way. My email address is josh@ctutrading.com. But if you wanted to continue the audio commentary, joining us live for today and for this week, feel more than free to go right down to the link on the banner below of this stream there in yellow to get yourself started. We're actually going to take a quick audio break right now, at least inside the trading room. I'll be back on at 2:30 in the afternoon to do the afternoon meeting. All right, folks, I'll talk to you all then. Take care.
Today, you are invited into the world of Fausto Pugliese, who battles some of the best traders in the world to win the real money World Trading Championships not once, not twice, but a jaw-dropping 12 times. Fausto is opening up his private members-only cyber group to you in this incredible opportunity. What makes Fausto so different, you ask? Some might say it was his upbringing. Others say that he is a family man through and through. But the story goes that when Fausto made his killing in the markets, he reached a pivotal moment in his life. He could continue on the path of so many of the greats, or he could make a hard right turn at the intersection of life choices and do something very different with his life. He could enjoy life without the stress that comes along with all that fame and success. He could spend his days celebrating his beautiful family. He could even give back for that blessing he had received. Fausto could get all that